The title of this lesson is Shakespeare in 6. You can see that Shakespeare in 6 occurs here on the second week of the fourth 9 weeks. This lesson comes very early in this fourth 9 weeks, as it is a very good scaffold to prepare your students to read A Midsummer Night's Dream. This is what the lesson looks like in Canvas. You can see you have a little bit of information about this lesson, the materials and resources, assessments, and so on. It's very important that you use the version of this story that is provided for you in Canvas because it was specifically created for this lesson. You'll have a graphic organizer to use for Shakespeare in 6. There are some multiple choice practice items included, as well as tips for multiple choice. There are a couple different activities for Shakespeare in 6. The first activity is that you will read this children's version of A Midsummer Night's Dream out loud in class with your students. This is very, very important that you read this story in class with your students out loud, answer questions, check for understanding, and make sure that students understand the basic plot of this children's version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. The story is broken up into 6 chunks. After your class has finished reading the children's version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, they will complete the multiple choice assessment. So multiple choice assessment is important. It's important to practice those skills, as students will have to take multiple choice assessments throughout their high school and college careers. You will give students time to independently reread the story and use the story to answer the multiple choice questions. We want them to have that practice of going back to that text and finding those answers. The questions are grouped according to the chunks of the story, which will help students focus on the correct section of the story because it is a few pages long. After students complete their own answers, you will put them into groups where they will compare their answers and justify their choices with textual evidence. Groups will present their answers and evidence, and you can provide the correct answers towards the end, have those discussions, and kind of see where the students were getting their evidence. This is the version that you'll use with your students. So this is a children's version of the original Midsummer Night's Dream. So you can see the different chunks there. There's 1, there's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So what's really great about this children's version of A Midsummer Night's Dream is that it exposes your students to the basic plot structure and characters of the Shakespearean version of the play before they even read it. So it's a great scaffold for not just your lower level students, but for all of your students. So before they even read the Shakespearean version, they have a basic understanding of characters and plot, the conflict and different things like that. So after they read the children's version, they will work through the multiple choice practice with their groups. And then this is the last activity in this lesson. This is called Shakespeare in 6. And this is a great activity to use with this play. And you can see that your graphic organizer is broken up into 6 chunks to represent the different chunks of the short story that they read. So after reading each chunk, illustrate the scene and write a brief summary statement provided in the box. So each student will receive a copy of this graphic organizer, and then they will create a little illustration in each of these boxes with a summary of each chunk underneath. So this is a great way to assess your students' comprehension of the short story, which will eventually turn into the play version that they will read in the coming weeks. And then there's your multiple choice practice. So we have a few examples to look at. So you can see this student had the 6 illustrations there, and then their summaries were a little bit longer, but that is fine. This is another example for you to look at. And then finally, we have a third example. So these are all pretty different. Some of the summaries are a little bit longer. This student was able to complete this digitally. So that is up to you. You could give your students the option of whether they wanted to draw this by hand or maybe complete it digitally. But that is completely up to you. So that is Shakespeare in 6. We wanted to point that out to you. This is always one of my students' favorite activities. I have used this with a couple different plays. I've used it with Romeo and Juliet in the 9th grade classroom, and definitely used it in the 8th grade classroom with A Midsummer Night's Dream. And my students always love it, and it always really helps them as they get ready to read the actual Shakespearean version of the play. So once again, we just wanted to point this out to you guys. We're not going to spend any time working through this lesson during our training, but we did want to point this resource in this lesson out to you. So if you have any questions about this, or if Kimberly and I can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out.